Hi, and welcome to part 2 of my response to Simon Mwewa Lane's meme on the popular debate about whether the ability to speak English is a measure of intelligence. In the first part, I talked about Spearman's G-factor theory, which suggests that intelligence is a single thing that accumulates from several smaller facets, while Gardner's theory looks at intelligence as manifesting in different independent ways. We demonstrated that the former is too narrow while the latter is too general. So we asked the question, what is the solution? How can we harmonize these two perspectives? Well, that's where the third theory comes into play. It is called the Trachic Theory of Intelligence by psychologist Robert Sternberg. Sternberg theorizes that intelligence is composed of three parts. The first is the analytical or logical thinking part. The second one is the problem-solving skills, which requires creative thinking and the ability to learn from experience. And lastly, we have the practical thinking, which helps one adapt or adjust to the social-cultural environment. Language skills and what we usually call street smarts fall into that last component. I particularly like this theory because it views intelligence as a purely mental process, unlike Gardner, who includes nonsense such as bodily kinesthetic. And it isn't narrow like Spearman's G theory. Trachic theory states that individuals will score differently on each of these aspects or abilities. Not only that, but some individuals will demonstrate higher scores on one of these aspects and lower on others. Going back to our roster, Aliyah and Alma may have the highest analytical or even have a high problem-solving skills component to them. And the difference between them is merely due to specialization, Aliyah's being academic and Alma's being musical specialization. But their problem-solving doesn't match Bill Gates, whose intelligence allowed him to write complex computer code and solve problems and dominate a highly competitive market. And lastly, we have Mr. MF and Greg Cox demonstrate very high practical skills because of their high adaptive nature and abilities. It takes a lot of cognitive adjustment to shift one's character, and this MF has done it 150 times. Anyway, story time. I had a friend in high school, into and through university. We just called him Lord Umu by fourth year. Don't ask. Let's just say it is derived from the Bemba word for the synonym for donkey. Anyway, great guy. But his language skills sucked. And I'm not just talking about English here. He wasn't fluent in any language that he was exposed to. Not Bemba, not Nyanja, not Tonga, which was his mother tongue, and not English. Yet, he grew up in Osaka. Oh, and to Mr. Mwewa, if you're watching this, please talk about the use of the word apparently. This guy used to kill me with his constant incorrect use of the word. And apparently, there are many other people who don't know how to use the word apparently. Anyway, almost still managed to get through one of the most difficult programs at the University of Zambia. He was a hardworking guy. And I mean, really hardworking guy. So, generally speaking, he was all right on the intelligence scale or intelligence-wise. Now, I know what you're thinking. Doesn't this prove that language is just one manifestation of intelligence? No, it doesn't. According to Trachic theory, it is only one component. And unlike Gardner's view, where it would be independent, here your performance on language skills affects the other skills and the overall intelligence score. For instance, if you score 7 on analysis, 8 on problem solving, and 3 on language, your overall cumulative intelligence is 18 out of 30. This puts you just around average, which would be the case with Lord Umu. It's not just because of the fact that the score is an average, that the Trachic theory doesn't support the language is just one kind of intelligence argument, but also because of the fact that intellectual abilities and skills correlate. Oftentimes, the score of one ability correlates positively with the other abilities. That means if you test or observe that one component is high, chances are that the other components will also be high, and vice versa. This is supported by Spearman's model as well and by IQ tests. High analytical skills will correlate with high verbal linguistic abilities. It is rare that an individual will excel in one or more skills and completely flop on all the others. Such are often cases of what are known as savants, and it's often problematic and correlates with things like autism, which is why it is sometimes called savant syndrome. By the way, remember that one smart kid in class? Did he or she just excel in one subject, or were they brilliant across all subjects? Science, maths, history, English, everything. Sure, they would be more dominant in some specific subjects, say maths and sciences, but that doesn't mean that they'll get a 40% in history. He or she would probably keep it at a C plus to B plus on that front. Also notice how the exceptional abilities of each of the individuals on our list are related to some sort of syntax or grammar, with the use of symbols just like language. Aliyah could read at 8 months, Alma could compose complex music at 5, while Bill Gates mastered and developed programming languages. Both music and coding are forms of language. They can both be written and be interpreted to communicate information. So while language abilities are indeed one aspect of intelligence, as a whole, they affect other scores on intelligence tests and correlate positively with other abilities. The second argument, often used to dispute that the ability to speak English can be a measure of intelligence, is that language is a cultural phenomenon and that English is just one language that one can possibly master. And that is very true. Proficiency in language is determined by the environment. It has a strong nurture component. Remember, we discussed that in the nuggets. So, to judge the intelligence of an uneducated Luapula-born and bred fisherman on how well they speak English would be ridiculous and unfair. But oftentimes, this judgment isn't laid upon completely illiterate people, but rather people that have been exposed to the language all throughout their life, in one way or another. And that's the reason that people have critical judgment of you. You are expected to learn. That's what this argument often ignores. Learning. Like I discussed in the nuggets, link in the description below, mastery of a language is often evidence of increasing or highly crystallized intelligence, which is learned intelligence. But then you may argue that after one's intelligence has crystallized, it is much more difficult to learn a new language, especially if the exposure happens in adulthood. And yes, that is true. But then you have also agreed with me. You have just been able to judge one's fluid intelligence as low based on the ability to speak a language as an adult, thus demonstrating that it can be used to measure intelligence, or in this case specifically fluid intelligence. Besides, you can't have crystallized intelligence without fluid intelligence, which is the raw processing analytical intelligence, which most people would consider intelligence in itself and as an important tool for learning. So the inability to learn or acquire information is a demonstration of low intelligence. That is why one of the first indicators of learning problems or mental retardation in the child is delayed speech. If a child at 5, 6, or 7 is still having problems with speaking, there is a problem. And that doesn't apply to just English, but any language. My final argument for English as being a measure of intelligence is in the definition of intelligence itself, and can help summarize some of the points that I have already given. Intelligence can be defined as a person's ability to learn and remember information, to recognize concepts and their relationships, and to apply the information to their own behavior in an adaptive way. Or the ability to derive information, learn from experience, adapt to environment, understand and correctly utilize thought and reason. Note how both definitions emphasize certain ideas and deliberately use certain words. They both touch on learning. They both emphasize the ability to retrieve or derive information. They both use the words adapt, and they both emphasize the application of knowledge or abilities. For one to be able to speak a language, all these things have to come into play. So, Let's consider the ability to speak English. Is it something that can be learned? Yes. Does it involve understanding and engagement of reasoning or analysis? Absolutely. Because your brain has to constantly generate correct grammar and syntax. This is particularly important when you switch between two or more languages. For example, English and Nyanja. In Nyanja, I would call this motokaya blue. The adjective comes after the noun. In English, I call this blue car. In this case, the adjective comes first, then the noun. After initial analysis and learning, being able to switch like this has become second nature. And there are many such twists one makes as they speak. A failure to do this shows difficulty in learning and recognizing patterns, whether you are doing it consciously or not. Lastly, is speaking a language an adaptive ability? Yes. If English is a necessary and useful part of one's day-to-day life, which it obviously is because it is Zambia's official language, it is imperative that your mind learns how to use it, the same way that you learned how to count or how to drive. Failure to do so effectively is a failure to adapt, and that suggests low intelligence. So, in conclusion, I agree with Mr. Mwewa's assessment that efficient use of the English language can be a measure of intelligence, because linguistic skills are an important part of overall intelligence abilities and often correlate positively with other intellectual abilities. They also demonstrate crystallized intelligence, learning abilities, and mental adaptive behavior. However, I would like to emphasize that the assessment should always be considered within the correct cultural context and learning environment. So, thank you very much for watching, and as always, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. I'm Mwah Lovu, and I hope that you have been cursed with knowledge. Hello there! Congratulations on successfully completing that YouTube video. You can claim your prize by clicking that subscribe button and the notification bell up there. And of course, your prize will be more YouTube videos from me. Thank you very much for watching. Bye!